Welcome back to the Con Culture Convo, guys. I'm Chris Bower, joined by my buddy Tim Hyde. We are coming to you from different places. Obviously, you're still at home, but I think we're heading to the same show this weekend. But I'm in Pennsylvania, just dragging along. Nice 2-day drive to the show on the East Coast. We're actually going to introduce a new segment or a new thing that we're going to do with the pod, and because we were talking to a lot of vendors just in the past and now and recently, and around New York, it kind of struck a nerve with me that so many vendors don't have a clue about the history of shows, of cons. And I don't mean the complete history of all comic conventions.
Yeah, especially,
I mean the history of a certain show.
Especially the ACers.
Yeah, especially the ACers. Us BCers have been around a little bit longer, so we do know a lot of this stuff. But I think I was surprised at how many BCers that they didn't really pay attention. They don't know the promoter. They don't know the history of the show, how many years it's been around. So I thought we would do a history of, and we'll pick a different con each time that we do it. And because we have coming up next week is Motor City's fall show, I thought we would do a history of Motor City Comic Con in Detroit. What say you, buddy? You like that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an idea that's, yeah, I mean, I'm a history buff. Everybody knows that. So if we can deep dive into the Comic-Con stuff, it's really cool. Because there's honestly a lot of stuff that people don't know, that it might have started as a one-day show for like 15 years. And suddenly the show turned into like a show that has 100,000 people now. I mean, there's a lot of shows that have been around a really long time. They just aren't what you see today as these massive celebrity 100,000 person shows. Right. At one point, they all started somewhere. And some of them it's 3 years ago. Sometimes some of them it's 30. And well, we're going to let you know. So enjoy. What is this lovely segment going to be called, Chris?
The Con Culture
Motor City
History Combo
Comic-Con edition,
featuring Motor City Comic Con. Yeah, I think that'll work. It's a lot of words, though. A lot of words. But yeah, let's jump into the history of Motor City Comic Con. The Con Culture Convo is supported by Toy Temple. Toy Temple is one of the largest Funko and exclusive pop culture distributors in the United States. They specialize in providing an experience for fans through events, experiences, and an easy-to-navigate website full of unique collectibles at incredible prices. They have 9 retail stores in Arizona, booths at San Diego and New York Comic-Con, and a fast-growing website with 24/7 customer service. So head on over to thetoytemple.com. And we have a special for our Convo listeners. Use promo code CONTALK15 to take 15% off your next order. That's thetoytemple.com. And thanks to Toy Temple for supporting the Convo. And we'll start with an overview. Motor City Comic Con was started in 1989 by Michael Goldman. He is the original owner and the current owner. First show had about 2,500 attendees. It started at the Dearborn Civic Center. Dearborn is just south of Detroit. It's where the Ford World headquarters is. They started that from 1989. They were there from 1989 to 1998. Then they moved over to the Novi Expo Center, which is on the western side, northwest side of Detroit in the suburbs. They were there from 1994 to 2004, and in 2005, they moved just down the street from the Novi Expo Center to the current place that it's at, which is the Suburban Collection Showplace. Still there in Novi. So
weird name, by the way. I've always thought that.
It is. Well, I think the Suburban Collection is
I don't know
place. I think that's whoever paid to have their name on it. Hold on, I digress.
Even more on par with the convention center.
But so currently even when they started, it was May was their main show, and then they did a fall show in October. That went on for many years. May being the original date, and in 2021, or before that, they had gotten rid of that I want to say it was 93 to 2004 that they had the 2-a-year shows. So it was a pretty good stretch of 11 years that they would do 2 a year, May and October. But then they kind of cut it out when they moved to the Suburban Collection Showplace. My guess is because it was a lot more expensive than the old Novi Expo Center, and they decided just to do the one show per year in May. And then they did that until 2021, when right after COVID, they were coming back from COVID, and they had a fall show because they didn't have the May show. And then they decided to have the May show in 2022 and then keep the fall show just like they used to do. Spring was when they were first doing it. Spring was always a 3-day show. The fall was always a 2-day show. And they used to do the fall show at the Dearborn Civic Center for several years before they moved both shows to the Novi Expo Center. Around 2012, 2013, they switched from a comics-based guest list, which, they used to have huge comic names there, and that was their focus. But around 2012, 2013, a lot of other cons did the same thing. They moved to more of a celebrity actor-based guest list. You still had, of course, big comic artists coming, but they focused a lot on the big Hollywood guests. So they would get people like Norman Reedus would, of course, come in, Carrie Ells, Edward James Olmos, all kinds of people like that. And 2013, they really started seeing the difference. Their attendance shot up from the 10 to 20,000 up to 30,000, and it's just been growing ever since. I think last year they claimed 50,000 attendees, and I've been there. I'd say they're getting close, 40 or 50,000.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is the overview of the Motor City Comic Con. Like I said, 1989 to now. And so let's get into it.
So, Chris, let me ask you a little question, since this is actually your local show and the show that got you into the Comic-Con world, correct?
That's true. I lived about 45 minutes from there. Dearborn, at least. So
tickets nowadays for most shows that we go to, as far as like attendees, at a 50,000 person show, you're looking at $80 probably a day average on a Saturday, something like that. 1989, first show ever.
Well,
how much were the prices to get in?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's
over or under $10 for one day.
I would say over, but no, maybe not. Let's say $10. How about that? Yeah. We'll just say $10.
$10. Okay, that's pretty fair. So it was a whopping $4 for one day or $7 for the weekend. Talk about inflation going the other way, huh?
I wish I had kept my ticket stub because I didn't go the first year, but I went the second year. 1990 was my first comic convention. It was the Motor City Comic Con in May there at the Dearborn Civic Center. And I was 13 years old. And it was the greatest weekend of my life. Day, because I only ever bought a day pass. Being 13, my parents had to take me down there.
Yeah, you can't pay $7 fucking for a weekend. That's ridiculous.
Well, they had to brought me down there twice, and there was no way they were going to do that. I could barely talk them into the one. So they would drop me off for a few hours, and I'd get to run around, do as much as I could before they came back to pick me up. Or if I could finagle my
Were you by yourself at 13?
Oh, yeah, 100%. See, back then in the early 90s, it was not cool to be a comic book nerd. That was definitely something that you hid when you were in school. I can remember many times going, for several years I went by myself, and then I finally found my childhood friend finally had enough interest in it when we were probably 15 or 16 to go with me. And he only went once, but he enjoyed it. Not enough to go again, but that was a lot more fun. And then it wasn't until I was in high school.
More of a company.
Yeah, exactly. That I had a couple of work buddies that were into comics. And we would go all together down to Motor City. But back when I went, I think it was 91 or 92, Image, all the artists, the biggest artists in the world left Marvel and started Image Comics. And part of their launch was going around to all the, well, you could do it back then, all the comic conventions that summer, which were, what, 20 at the most? And you could hit every con in the world at that point.
Maybe.
I mean, maybe. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Either way, it was the coolest thing.
So
I think I was 14, and Mark Silvestri, Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, Jim Lee, like you name it, like the whole Image cast. That was awesome. And I will say that Motor City always brought in big names for comics. And man, in the early 90s, comics were up there with popularity. Like, I probably at an all-time high. You got to remember, Jim Lee's X-Men #1 sold 6 million copies. They probably haven't sold 6 million of one book in the last 30 years. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but the 90s were something else. So these guys were like true huge celebrities, and they didn't charge for autographs, man. Like, this was kind of before that was a thing. And you could just take a stack. I remember meeting Jim Lee, and I had a stack of Alpha Flight because he had gotten to start at Marvel and Alpha Flight. I loved Alpha Flight. I had him sign all my Alpha Flight covers, and he's just sitting there signing and signing. You know, I get this line that's a mile long behind me. I do not care. I'm so excited that Jim Lee's signing my Alpha Flight books. Yeah, ridiculous, man. It was a cool time. I fancied myself an artist and did my little sketchbook that was horrific, and then walked right up to John Byrne and said, "Would you look at my sketchbook?" Because I didn't know that was frowned upon. And God love John Byrne. He looked through it and said, "These are terrible. You should practice." And he was right. Yeah, totally. And it shattered me. Like, I thought he was going to get out of Marvel contract, and give him it to my 15-year-old self. Be like, you shouldn't finish high school. You should come work in the bullpen at Marvel, obviously. And he didn't do that. He just set me straight, and that was that. So, but back then, I would go and I would get sketches from huge, like, have Mark Bagley sketch me Captain America, and he just did it. And I don't remember him even charging me for it, because there was not a whole lot of lines for some of these massive names now, or the lines were so short. And then I remember the first time, I want to say it was 97 or 98, maybe it was 96, that they brought actors in, and that was the Star Wars. It was the Behind the Mask tour, they called it. And that was when I got to meet Peter Mayhew and David Prowse and Jeremy Bulloch, and I was a massive Star Wars fan, so that was like the biggest deal ever.
2-part question for you. Obviously, a lot of people listening to this didn't go to cons in 1989,
or 1990,
even 90s, or even early 2000s. To be honest,
that's true.
People like me. I think my first show was in 20. It was like one of the first. I think it was the first year WonderCon moved to Anaheim, whatever that was. I think it was 2008, 2009, something like that.
Man, I used to do the show when it was in San Fran.
Yeah, there was a different world even to today. Mm-hmm. It's gone crazy, but even from where you're talking about to then, it was insanely different.
Yes.
So explain 2 things. One, how did you find out about cons?
Yeah.
Like, how did you find about Motor City when today you would just go on a Facebook event page, or maybe see a billboard, or maybe, more likely it's an ad somewhere or another show, whatever. That, and then also explain kind of what these cons were laid out as. Like, when you walked in, how did it look when you went to the Dearborn the first time?
Absolutely. So your comic shop, my comic shop was Comic Relief, and I would, of course, everybody, if you were a comic collector,
they're still open, right?
They are still open. Still open right there in Burton, Michigan.
Crazy.
I know, that's nuts. Still in the same building.
Cheers to them.
I know, good for them. So but they would have a stack of flyers. I would come in on Tuesdays like every other comic collector, and then there's this stack of flyers right next to the register. And you're like, what is this? And there's these names, these huge comic names that I know right away, and they're going to be there. And I'm like, well, I need to be there. I mean, that's what every comic collector wanted to be. So Comic Relief was where I would find out when they were coming. And then when you got to the con, the first table you saw inside the entrance was a table full of flyers and postcards for other conventions that were in probably a 3-state radius, but they were all.
Do you remember any other shows?
Swap meet,
any other shows specifically?
Shows. Motor City, not really. They were all
like Wizard World, or like.
I do remember when the first Wizard World, but that was in Wizard Magazine. For those of you guys don't know, you might know Wizard World. Yeah. We'll get to Wizard World much later, but Wizard Magazine.
Yeah, we will talk about that in the future. Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
Well, that's true. But yeah, you got your information about Wizard Worlds from Wizard Magazine price guide that came out monthly. So, but we'll definitely discuss that in a later show. But I would find, little postcards and stuff. I don't even recall ever going to any other one because almost never had any guests at those one-day shows. It was basically a swap meet for comic books. And yeah, Motor City was the only game in the Midwest. And it was right off the bat, when you walked into the Dearborn Civic Center, you would walk into the main entrance. To the left, you would go toward the gymnasium, which is where the vendor floor was. To the right is where they had all the comic guests. You had independent books. You had all the big name comic guests set up on tables down that way. But when you would walk into the vendor floor, I do remember walking down the hallway to the vendor floor. They always had an art contest. And I bet I put in 10 different pieces over, never won a single thing. Should have listened to John Byrne. But they used to do an art contest that they would, judge. They would have some, comic book artist judge it, and then you would get a prize if you were there on Sunday. That was always right before the doors when you walked into the Motor City gymnasium there at Dearborn. And the gymnasium, I'll bet you there was only 4 or 5 aisles. And right down the center, they had tables all the way around the gymnasium, and then maybe 3 aisles down the center, maybe 4. I'll bet it was 3. And it was packed. Holy cow, was it packed. Like you would walk in and the heat, the humidity of body.
And the smell of 99.9% older dudes.
I got to know Convo very quickly. It was so hot in that gymnasium because of how many people they would pack into it. It was crazy. And there would be dealers like back then, movie scripts were a huge thing. There was always a booth that had just milk crates full of scripts. And you would thumb through them like they were comics. But basically, they would just get a script from a certain movie, make tons of copies of it, sell it for 10 to 15 to $20 each. And they would have...
Which is now a felony, so don't try it if you're listening to this. That is a felony.
I'm pretty sure that's why we don't see those guys anymore. But speaking of felony, there would also right next to those guys would be a whole VHS dealer of nothing but bootlegs. I remember buying the Star Wars Holiday Special on VHS there, the Roger Corman's Fantastic Four on VHS there. It was anything that was nerd related that you really couldn't get anywhere else. And this is pre-internet, so you really couldn't get it anywhere else. It was the only place to see it. And they were like $10-15 a tape. It was awesome. Of course, you had your comic and your toy dealers. I remember Styling Online, which is massive booths now at these shows. I remember buying my first
shout out James.
Shirt. That's right. It's my first Superman shirt from one of his tables there, one of the first Motor Cities.
And what size was it then?
It was only extra large or 2X. And I've added some X's, let me tell you, in both shirts and life.
You quite a few above. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a whole thing, but it was so exciting. And I'll just also tell you this. It was 99%. I don't think that is an exaggeration on percentage male. The only time a female came in there was if they came with their husband, who was a dealer, or a comic creator might bring his wife. I remember, and this would have been the late 90s, we were already at Novi. And I remember thumbing through comics, and this Novi, by the way, was 3 times the size of Dearborn. So when they moved to the Novi Convention Center, that's why they started doing their May show there. It was a way bigger show, way more dealers, way more,
Okay.
comic artists, all that. I remember thumbing through comics and the whole crowd got quiet. The whole room did. And everybody looked around. It's because there was two probably early 20s females that were just there with their backpacks on. And everyone was like,
Will you marry me? Will you marry me? I love you.
yeah, pretty much. But like everybody quit talking. It was like you could noticeably hear, audibly hear when a female walked in. It was so rare back then. Yeah, it was
Which
crazy.
is, it's so wild to think about, because today, like, it's, I think San Diego Comic-Con released that, it was either last year or the year before, that they had almost 50% female
Oh,
at
I
San Diego
guarantee
Comic-Con.
it. I mean, most
It
of the
was
cons
like
we go
very
to,
close.
yeah, it's always half and half, if not more. And post
Yeah.
2010, it's families. I mean, it wasn't that
Yeah.
common to see kids there. You might see a dad
Yeah.
with his son, that was maybe a little younger, but most of the time it was teenage 20 to 40-year-old dudes. And that was
Yeah.
it.
I mean, for me, obviously I'm much younger than you.
Much
And so
infinitely younger.
decades.
Yeah.
The only thing I remember doing, I never really did con thing. I was more into trading cards, so I
Sure.
did like the trading card shows at the
Yeah.
hotels and
Oh
the
yeah.
little
I
small,
went to
like
a bunch of
very
places
small
as a
convention center
baseball
type
card
stuff.
collector, so
And I swear it was like
I
a
definitely
couple
went
of
to
kids, but
conventions.
like I was into like sports cards, like
Oh,
not
dude.
Pokemon till later on. But it was just all men, just older white
Yeah.
dudes. That's literally was 98% of the crowd was.
100%.
And it's crazy thing about now that you see, I watch so many like kind of influencers for like trading card stuff and
Yeah.
comics and whatever. Just keeping my eye out, and there's so many females, especially in the Pokemon space, so many attractive
Yeah.
and intelligent and talented females leading the way when it comes to this
Yeah.
influencing stuff, and it's great.
Yeah.
I love it. So I'm
It is.
definitely a
It's
big
very
difference
cool.
from 1991 Chris Bauer Motor City Comic Con. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. 100%.
so
Um,
when was the
yeah.
like celebrity wise, when you went there, what was the first non-comic person who you got
Yeah.
starstruck from? I know you said Star Wars was that first like
That was it. Like
transition
that
from
that
comics
behind the
to like
mask tour.
kind
I
of the
think they
celebrity
only had
realm that we know today. What was that person?
they dabbled in it. Yeah, it would have to be Peter Mayhew. Was probably the first autograph I ever got. Jeremy Bullock was probably second. Prowse, like all those guys. I'll bet there was 10 on that tour. I could be wrong. That I'd have to look it up, but they might have been done more. But I know in Motor City they had them against the far wall of the artist wing of the building, and I just remember going right down the line. I remember autographs were $10. And I remember spending at least $50 or $60 right away getting their 8x10 signed. And back then I didn't even think to bring. Oh, I had a camera on me, but sometimes I never would have thought to ask for a selfie. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't even a thing then. If
Yeah,
anything,
gotta
you would
wind it
take a
up.
picture. Yeah, pretty much. You basically take a picture of them doing the autograph, but it was so foreign to me to even think, hey, can I come back there and take a photo with you? Um, and yeah, that was, I've got some early photos and I say early, I mean, they're on paper. They don't even exist digitally. But like me and Warwick Davis, it was in the late 90s. He came and I thought to have my buddy take a picture of me with Warwick Davis at the table. And there was a few
Were
like that,
you
but
like on your knees and he was on a ladder? How did
no,
that work?
he was sitting at a table on a high
Like,
chair. So yeah, exactly. But so it didn't look that crazy. But this would have been, as I'm sure he thought, the end of his career because he hadn't acted in forever. It was long before Harry Potter. Um,
uh,
and well, I guess it
yeah,
wasn't that. Yeah, yeah, I'd say it was long before Harry Potter. Because what was the first Harry Potter movie? Was what,
it
99?
was 99.
Yeah, so this was in mid 90s. So yeah,
Yeah,
he probably just thought,
I
this is the
mean,
end and we'll
a
just go
little
get
down
nuts.
period, but yeah,
I do have one funny memory. Come to think of it, I remember Billy D. Williams
yeah. I
came,
mean,
and
his game.
this would have been 97 ish, and it was a huge deal. like it's Billy D. Williams. I mean, he had not done any cons that anybody knew of. I'm sure he had, but as far as I knew, that's the first time I had ever seen him. And I get in his line early, and this line is huge. And he finally comes out, and his handler gets up with a bullhorn and makes this announcement and says, Billy D. Williams will start signing your items. The only things he will not sign is anything Colt 45. And this dude, like 10 people back from me, goes, God damn it. And I turn around and he's got this full-size standee of Billy D. Williams holding the Colt 45 that he's been lugging around the con. And he was very
the whole time. Oh my god.
Yeah. But the rest of us were there for Lando stuff. So
it's so random, though. That's so random.
Totally. Yeah. My guess is they must not have paid him for some commercial or something. He just held a grudge, I guess. I don't have a clue. But that was, I remember that from the first time I met him. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
So if I remember correctly, you told me that you got rejected as an artist for there, but you actually started working with Will.
Yes.
It was at Motor City, right? What year was that? And tell me what happened with that. How did that all transition?
I don't know if I've said it on this podcast before, but my transition into vending at cons was my buddy Will Woods and I started a photography business. And back then, Froggy Photo was the only company doing photo ops. And this would have been in the 09, 2010 range, maybe 08. And they had botched a photo op of mine with Carrie Fisher at Motor City. And I was a photographer at the time. Will and I had a wedding photography business. And they messed up this photo op. They didn't want to fix it right. And so he photoshopped Carrie Fisher into a photo with me. It looked horrific. They botched my Carrie Fisher photo. Froggy did. And then when he fixed
what'd they do?
He was holding the camera instead of on a tripod using a trigger. So he'd come in and be like, ready, click. And he was just moving the whole time. So I remember thinking, like, there's no way that's going to not be blurry. And sure enough, my photo, he laid it on the thing and wanted me to pick it up. You couldn't even tell who I was standing with. It was so blurry. And so I pointed that out to him. He's like, oh, let me fix it. To me, in my idiot brain, I thought, oh, he's going to have Carrie Fisher come back over. He's like, just stand there and act like your arms around her. And I was like, okay, I got to see this. And then I had to bug him after the show for 6 weeks to send me the JPEG because he hadn't photoshopped it yet. And when he finally did, he was clear he had spent about 4 minutes on it. And that was kind of the eye-opening thing. I was like, wait a minute. This guy's the only deal in town or in the comm business doing this, but he's terrible. And he needs some competition. And literally that next year, so we got it launched within about 3 months, and that next year we did Motor City Comic Con. We took that account from him. And we were at Motor City as the con photographers. I think 08 or 09 was our first year. And that was the first time I had ever worked at a comic convention, especially Motor City. I had watched many people work at Motor City growing up, but I had never thought to myself, oh, I want to be a dealer or a vendor here. And once we started doing that, I was like, oh, this is great. The only problem with launching our business was it was a photo op business for cons during the recession, the great housing crisis that had started in 08. And back then it was like pulling teeth to get people to pay $40 for a photo op of a huge name. And it was a big deal because all actors did photos at their tables then. They had never thought of going to do a professional photo op. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the absolute how it was back then. Because I remember having to argue with their managers to be like, no, it would be great if they didn't take photos at the thing and they sold that would help us sell them. They were like, I could never ask them to do that. I was like, like money? Because right now you're not making a dime off of those. And I remember Erin Gray, who was a 70s, star, but she used to handle people. I remember her being like, this is a great idea. It dawned on her when I was on the phone with her, like, oh, we've been giving these photos away for free, and this is a great idea. And then they have something to honor it. So it was a new concept back then. Anyway, we started doing that, Motor City, and then we only did that for about 2 or 3 years, and then phased into the art game because we kind of launched at the same time. Will was doing art, and then by then he had met his now wife Tyrene, and they started creating art, and then we just started making more money doing that, and didn't have to deal with D-list celebrity managers, which are the worst, as you know.
Trust me. Yes, I do. The smaller the name, the bigger the ego for the agent, and it makes no sense.
Yeah, it was horrible to work with those people. So I was glad to put the photo op business away. However, that was again still during the housing crisis. Once they came out of that, I've heard they do really well with photo ops, and I wish I would have stuck around it because we would have actually made real money.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's my Motor City kind of getting up to date. That probably brings me into your era when you started doing it. What was your first year doing it?
So I believe it was 2014. I was working with
Yeah.
Damon Bowie. And I remember this was like, Detroit did not recover from the recession. You know what I mean? Like they were like, it was nasty in 2014.
It was bad. Yeah.
I mean, and we had gone to I'd gone to another show, and it was not in a great area, and I'm not going to name what the show was, but it was not in a great area, and it made me a little like sketchy about it. Going by myself, I hadn't traveled like I am now. Like nowhere worries me now. I'm like whatever.
Right.
But like back then, being like in my 20s and not have traveled a lot, it was weird. And I just seen like 8 people had gotten murdered in Detroit, and I was like, dude, I'm not. And he's like, yeah, we got in a Motor City. Yeah, I got you in the Motor City, so like I'm gonna send you. And I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm going. And he looks at me and goes, Tim, I did it last year. It's a great show. And he goes, he's like, it's not in Detroit, even though it's called Motor City. I was like, yeah, it is. He's like, no. It's in a suburb. I said, that doesn't matter. And he goes, no. This is a like more wealthier suburban white neighborhood with a convention center in the middle. And I looked it up and I was like, oh no, it's actually pretty nice. This is great. And we went there and we killed it. And I've done it, I think, every year except for one, I think, since I missed one. Obviously, the COVID year we all missed, and then I missed
2
one
because they quit. Will quit doing that after a few years, and I would just go back and do it. But then they got this wild hair around the mid, I want to say 2015, 26, no, maybe 2017, where for like 2 years they wouldn't allow reps or proxies to sell the art. You had to be the artist, even if you were on the vendor floor. You had to be the artist to deal there. And so I didn't do it those 2 years, but then they got over that and went right back to it. So
yeah, I was there with Damon in those 2 years, and then when they transitioned out, he's like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna stay at home. You can go." And I was like, "All right, that's fine. Whatever. It's a good show. I like it." So
it is a good show.
I quite enjoy it.
I
will say this. The one unique thing that a lot of people may not know, and this is a little tidbit about for artists who are going, like you mentioned, artists, it just brought up a good memory to pull up here. If you're doing an artist alley table, as an artist, you have to be an artist, obviously. But if you're an artist and you are coming to the show at Motor City, you actually are a guest. So you still buy your table. We actually are kind of announced as a guest, as an artist guest, but you also get access to the green room.
Oh, yes.
And you get the green room for like, it's literally half the vendor floor gets it. We don't, even though we spend, $2,000 on a booth, but the artist alley people get it. I mean, there's ways around that. If you're smart, you'll figure that one out.
Trade badges.
I wasn't going to say it, but damn. Okay. I swear Michael Goldman and the Chris Bower's viewpoints and thoughts and process on this show does not convey all people of common culture.
House and home, but they have great nachos.
They did have good nachos.
Usually,
you got some for me last time, and that was awesome. I was like, I'm not going to go, but you can go. And you brought me some, and I was like, oh hell yeah! You got a little nacho machine cheese. It's like, it's great.
They're the best in the business on green room. Well, I don't get into a lot of green rooms except Motor Cities, really. So
They're the only one for you. They're the best and worst.
Sure. I'm not sure if the other ones are good, but they probably are.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a very unique thing. So just a thought process when if any of you artists who are just doing it for the first time or maybe 1 year or whatever, and you never really realized it, but yeah, you actually get access, and that's pretty cool. It does save you some money, which we can all help, go grabbing some snacks and waters and whatever, saves you money and time and everything. And that adds up on a show, a couple, 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks. I mean, that's something in your pocket for you to go buy yourself a nice dinner at the end of the show,
Agreed. Yeah. So this year they're doing, I guess that brings us up to this year. Well, what else? I mean, that's pretty much the history of it. So Michael Goldman, let's just focus on him for a minute. He is the current owner. He started it, but he's always run it with his family, and they've grown into a pretty large staff. They do have a pretty good staff going, but he's always run it with them, and they've kind of ruled Detroit as far as cons go. I know a few have come and gone, but Motor City's
all of them have come and gone. Yeah.
And I know that I remember there was a show that Dennis Barger started called Detroit Fanfare, and I did that for a few years, and that was a fun show, but it just couldn't keep going because apparently, the Goldmans have Detroit locked down. Let's just say that. So it's tough for cons to sustain. They're in Detroit if they're not Motor City.
Yeah, I mean, even, big boys that had some money and everything. Imagineering came in, and I thought they had a pretty good show, but they didn't last. So
2 years, that's all they lasted. And I had to be great at that show.
I did.
And it just didn't come back the third year, and they just quit doing it after that. And now they're FanX. FanX bought Imagineering a few years ago. But I
can't imagine they're going to go to Detroit. Yeah, that would be a good one to do because they have a very interesting history for sure. So,
but just to recap, history-wise, this is a show that's been around since 1989, which makes it, how many years old does that make it?
Wasn't it just their?
I guess 35 years? No.
89 to 99 is 10. 99 to 2009 is 20.
30.
And 35. 19 is 30. So yeah, this is their 35th one coming up in May.
This is their 35th year coming. No, I think we already did this.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
this is the second November. So they moved there 2 years ago. Well, they did the first October show right in 2022. And then last year was the first year they did it in November, I think. And then this year they kept it in November. So that is a change from their previous fall show dates. They always kept it in the October, but now it is November. It can bump into the two other biggest shows in Michigan, which makes me feel like that's why they did the date change to November. It just kind of feels that way because it's kind of weird. But there's always Youmacon, which is at Kobo Arena downtown. And that's a huge anime show. And then usually within a week or two of that is Grand Rapids Comic-Con. And now we have Motor City's kind of slid in the middle of those two now.
Yeah.
So,
and their guest list is stacked for the November one. I don't know how they pulled off such a great guest list.
They always do. I mean, they've been in the business doing this for 20 years of the media guests. So
you know who's going to be there?
Who?
The official Con Culture Convo crush, the man crush that you and I both have. Manny Jacinto is going to be there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. That's like one I probably would pay to do a photo op with just because I'm like, he's just so badass. I'm like, we love the acolyte here on the Con Culture Convo.
Sure.
So
he was a pretty awesome Sith. That's all I can say. I would have liked to have seen where they went with that. But it is cool to see the acolyte actors actually doing some cons. I think they'll do well. I think that
I hope he makes a fuck ton of money.
Yeah, I hope so too.
And I think he was I think he did The Good Place too, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he did. Correct.
For 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So he's got enough of a draw. I
Of course,
think.
he was like a nice little innocent kind of like, oh, skinny little Asian kid on that show. And then he comes to Acolyte. He's just this jacked like Sif, like,
Yeah.
oh man, like
He's badass. Yeah,
he's making all those mommies go crazy.
that's right. He's doing great. But yeah, just to recap, it's a 35-year-old convention that's been around. It's the same owner. So learn that name, Michael Goldman, and they have a comic shop there in Detroit. They always have. That's really where the idea for the convention came from, was their comic store. I might say they probably have 2 or 3 locations. I've been to one of them once, but I want to say they have multiple locations. I could be wrong on that though. But I know he's been a comic dealer in Detroit for years and years and years and years. So,
yeah.
That's the recap for the history of Motor City Comic Con. I think it's an old school show, back when they were around, when they were the big thing in the Midwest before Chicago Wizard World.
Yeah.
There was probably less than 50 comic conventions nationwide. And it was just real rare. So a lot of people would travel for Motor City Comic Con because otherwise we didn't have another con for 4 months, that you
and they still do, to get credit where credit's due. They still get a lot of people outside of Michigan.
Yeah.
So
I do think they get a lot
kudos
of Midwesterners, but it is what it is. They bring in 50,000 people now, which is not bad, going from a 2,000 person attended show in 1989 to grow it to a consistent 40 to 50,000 attendees.
I will say this, Michael Goldman, if you're listening to this, we need to go back to the prices of 19. I want $7 weekend passes.
Yeah, that would be great if they could do that. They're never going to.
I want deflation. Deflation.
I want to know what vendors paid in '89. I'm going to go with 20 or $30 a table. I'd like to
maybe not even that much. My God. Probably wasn't even triple digits. That's the crazy part.
There's no way it was triple digits. I'll bet you it was probably $30-$40 a table at the most. Maybe even 20.
Yeah, James from Styling had 19 tables and it only cost him $185 for all of them.
It was 2 tables and 1 grid wall behind it with shirts hung on it.
Wow.
And now you look at those booths and it's a multi-million-dollar company. It's massive.
And all because of Motor City Comic Con.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, that is local for James. I know, I'm almost positive he's from Michigan. And
he lives in Florida now, but
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, he lives in Florida. One of his houses got a huge tree fell right through it during the hurricane. Crazy.
Hurricanes ain't messing around, dude.
Yeah. No.
Good Lord. Anyway.
But there's no hurricanes ever to come to Motor City or Motor City Comic Con. You don't have to worry about that in Novi, so go out there November 8th to the 10th and next May as well. So go enjoy you guys yourself. And thank you guys very much. We appreciate you all listening.
We do, and we hope you enjoyed this history of, and we'd like to do some more of these and help you guys learn a little bit more about this great industry that we all enjoy.
And if there's any of them that you guys really want to see, we are going to do a couple. We're going to do a lot because there's a lot of older, cooler ones that we want to do, both anime, gaming, pop culture, Comic Cons. We're going to do them all as long as they're like a decent history to it. But if there's one specifically you want next, drop it in the comments.
Please do. We like those comments. Yes. And don't forget to like and share.
And subscribe.
Podcast. Well, subscribe that too. That would be nice. But we would love to get these shared out there. And if you guys enjoy it, share it with somebody else. Maybe they'll enjoy it.
All right. Well, that does it. Join the Convo.